Bach lived from the mid 1600s and died in like 1730 something. I'm not really good with dates, so just to get the gist of where we are. And this was the Baroque period of music, so this was kind of right after Gregorian chant and when music was starting to get more harmonically complex and stuff like that. And in this prelude, the kind of genius behind it is that it starts with just a C major scale, which is, if any of you guys know what a C major scale is, it's just that, and that's how he kicks it off. And the genius of it is just what this man can do just with a scale, and because it kind of takes us on a harmonic journey, going through lots of different spaces, but it all just begins and ends just with the C major scale. Does anyone have any questions or comments, or we can do that after I play, just because like Eric said, it's kind of interactive, so we'd love to see what you guys think after. So yeah, without further ado, I'll get to it. Comments or questions about the style or how it's written, or like what you guys felt through it? If you guys kind of, yeah. Anyone else? No? Yeah?
Yeah, it was so nice. Do you feel like you can put a bit of personality into what you play, or is the beauty in recreating what he wrote in his music?
I think it's a bit of both. I personally, I feel that like the written music is like a vector for communicating your own story. So your own emotions, your own energy through kind of like this lens that is composed by these genius composers. And why their work is so genius is because what they wrote is so ubiquitous to the human story in a way that anyone can connect with it with their own story, even though none of us lived in the 1700s. And so that's how I see it anyway. Yeah?
It felt like it had like quite a pace to it. Like it was very like traveling somewhere.
Yeah.
Until the very end you were just slowed down a bit, so it was really nice. But yeah, you really felt like you were moving forward.
Yeah. It's quite relentless.
Yeah. But it seemed like kind of not frantic, but like uplifting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a very, like you said, like uplifting character to it. Yeah.
And I found that kind of writing, it doesn't just sound like a solo instrument. I can hear bass and almost orchestral chords and the melody, of course.
Yeah.
Just coming from that one instrument.
Yeah, that is Bach's genius in a nutshell. It's how he can basically with one instrument have everything there, and that's why all the solo cello suites and also the solo violin partitas and the solo flute partitas and all the other works that he did were so great because they had everything in them. Yeah.
So it's almost like a complication of chords.
Yeah. It's almost, I see it like it's a story that's being told through harmony. So through the chords and how the chords change, that's where the story unfolds. And it's through sound, and so it's through emotion instead of through narrative. And yeah, but somehow because there's no words, it can hit deeper and communicate more even without actually saying anything. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand something. I mean, people write the music because they want to convey their own mood, their own feeling through music. And I'm wondering that did Bach also write something that he's trying to convey through what he was feeling at the time, or is that the gift of genius that what they do that is kind of broad spectrum that anyone can more or less just put their mood into it? It reflects their own mood. I'm just trying to understand.
Well, with Bach, he was a deeply religious man, and he wrote for the church mostly, and so I'm not a music historian, so I can't say for sure, but I would argue that basically all of the works that he wrote have some religious context to them, and so he kind of wrote for the transcendent, for the divine, but he could also put himself and his humanity in that. But that's why it's so pure in a way with Bach, because there's no ego there, because he's writing for the divine, but still transmitting his humanity and humility with that. And I think that's why Bach hits me so hard, generally.
On every one of his manuscripts, he put Solo Deo Gloria, meaning glory only to God. So I thought that was kind of neat, just dedicating each piece he wrote to God. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very interesting.
All right, so the next piece we're going to play is, we're going to jump about 100 years to, this is late Beethoven. Sonata. It's the fourth Beethoven Sonata, Opus number 102, number 1.
What's a sonata?
Good question.
Oh, I wasn't ready for that question. Well, a sonata it's a compositional form that composers wrote in. So originally there was a very structured form of 4 movements, a fast movement, a slow movement, and a dance movement or a scherzo, and then another fast movement. That was the original structure of it. But what Beethoven did, especially in this sonata, is he basically took all that down, and because in the later periods of his life, he was extremely experimental for the time, and that's something that we take for granted now because we listen to it now, everyone having heard Beethoven for 200 years, and we're like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's Beethoven. But at the time, it was quite shocking to the public what he would write, because, for example, in this sonata, he cuts down the 4-movement structure into 2 movements. So there's just 2 movements, and he begins with a slow beginning and then a fast section, and that's the first movement, which is completely disruptive of the tradition. And then in the second movement, again, he goes slow and then fast, which is, at the time, was unheard of. We're just playing the first movement today, so you won't get to see the whole arc of it. But basically, with late Beethoven especially, he was very extreme, also not just in his compositional style, but also how he composed, jumping between extremes of character. So he can kind of go from a really transcendent, beautiful melody or a beautiful serene atmosphere, and then go straight to something extremely turbulent and dark and dramatic. Yeah?
That's almost like his own interpretation of his life experience.
Yeah. He was a pretty mental guy, so it gets reflected like in 1 year of his life he moved house 9 times or something, because he just kept getting kicked out of all of his apartments. He would do weird things like take baths in his living room and stuff like that. So this music, it's kind of bipolar in that way, where it's always jumping from extremes really quickly without ever really giving you time to prepare. And so if you feel like you're getting whiplash, that's totally fine. And so hope you enjoy. And this time I will be playing the cello. So. Yeah, any other thoughts, impressions, or?
Love the energy in unison.
Thanks.
I was going to say, it feels like a really kind of tormented mind. It was like you had like some beautiful like soft pieces in the middle, and then they were surrounded by this like harsh franticness.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to get into that, but
I think it felt like the season change, like the weather in a way, the past few weeks of going from summer to
Yeah.
winter, and that sort of erratic,
Yeah.
sometimes beautiful and sunny, and then it's absolutely pouring down. It felt
Yeah.
the way the season all changed.
Yeah.
Perfect illustration of life.
Yeah.
So next we're going to go to Johannes Brahms, and he basically lived straight after Beethoven, but funnily enough, because what we're going to play now is the first Brahms Sonata. Again, we know what that is. The first movement of the first Brahms Sonata.
What's a movement?
It's like a track. But he wrote this quite early in his life, so it's actually probably like within 30 years of the last piece we just played. But does anyone know what Brahms looked like, or know who Brahms was, or no?
I just know I used to listen to lullabies when
Yeah.
it was actually Brahms.
Yeah, like
I found that better than
yeah, the classic lullaby. Do you know it?
Yeah.
Can you play?
Oh, the music.
Da, 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 yeah. Yeah, that's by Brahms. But yeah, we're not playing that, so don't worry. But so him writing this early in his life, it's kind of really full of a lot of youthful angst. It's not quite the same as the Beethoven. It's not quite as black and white, but it's still really turbulent, and it's kind of an exploration of inner emotional struggle, this movement, and it kind of goes through different phases of introspective sadness to like really stormy outbursts of emotion, and there's always this kind of searching for light and happiness that goes on, but he can never quite find it. And in the end, for me, I think what he finds in the end of the movement is just acceptance, and that's the beauty of it, because that's kind of like life as well. But yeah, so hope you enjoy. I'm kind of going through it with you guys. But I have to, it's like you have to have some level of detachment because I have to do it, you know, but it's, but yeah. So the goal would be to be able to just fully let go and just let it happen, but I'm not quite there yet. I still have to kind of manage my left and right hand to make sure that they're doing the right thing, but hopefully one day I'll get there, you know. Hey.
What about you, Cello?
Yeah?
Well, I mean, Brahms is always one of my favorite composers. Like, he's very sensitive in a way that, I don't know if you've seen his picture when he's old. He's like chubby and he has like heavy beard. But when he was younger, he's really handsome. And he's like, you know, one of the most handsome men I've ever seen. So yeah, I don't know what's happened to him. Yeah. Well, yeah. So like, yeah, he looks very different compared to the music he writes. It's just so touching, but like sorrowful in a way. Like, that's why I think Beethoven is one of his like model, basically, because he's greatly influenced by Beethoven. And I think they have a sort of similar thing as that they want to fight against to the fate, but they don't want to give up. But in a way, like they sort of accept and they decide to live with it. It's more like that. So like, yeah, it's just like, I love Brahms very much. Yeah.
I think a lot of people find it really difficult to express themselves and put their feelings into words in general, but even more so nowadays because we're bombarded by so many different stimuli around us.
Yeah.
So to me, it's absolutely amazing that he managed to put so many different feelings and so much anguish through music.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can still feel it nowadays, the fact that it still resonates with people nowadays, I think that's the most impressive thing.
Yeah.
Because it just comes to show that regardless how much time passes, we are still human in the same basic manner, in the same basic way, and still kind of touches
Exactly.
the hearts. I haven't done my very, but it touches my heartstrings.
Yeah, exactly. Like like for example, the COVID, we live with it. It's a difficulty, we're still facing it right now. But like we sort of against it and we also try to live with it. This is exactly like, that's the emotional connection that I feel like with Brahms or Beethoven. Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure like even though you have, maybe you guys don't know much about music, but I'm sure you can feel it from his music. This is no need background or anything. It's just like, it's there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Or another way, my way of putting it is, as it was there, it's now, I never shall be.
Yeah.
But it's how I saw that, it's basically like a piano was like a spirit, and, you know, sorry, I don't know what instrument that is.
The cello.
The cello, sorry.
Okay.
It was like the man himself, and you've got the spirit literally working alongside the man, and literally whatever the man was at storm with himself, the spirit was also trying to be at peace with the man.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just when the man became a bit more still, and more at peace with himself, so did the spirit, and that's exactly how I felt.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah. It's like, I think it catch the essence of like a duo, basically.
Yeah.
Duo means like we two instruments play together. That's the ideal balance of like duo playing, I'd say. So thank you so much. That's actually a good, like a very big compliment. Yeah, for our playing. Yeah.
I'm really curious, which one comes first? Just thinking about the last piece that you did with Beethoven and then this one. The last piece, it sounded like the piano was written first, whereas this one, it sounds like it's the cello first. And then the piano is kind of harmonizing / doing the spirit work, but very different in terms of the balances.
I'm curious too, actually.
But that's touching on something really interesting because like with the Beethoven cello sonatas, those were, before those, there were basically no cello sonatas, and the cello was used basically as an accompaniment instrument. And it was only through Beethoven sonatas where the cello actually started to have an equal role with the piano. And actually, the first two sonatas by him in his early period are basically just a piano sonata with cello accompaniment. So it literally is like a sonata for piano and then cello. And so there's definitely, it's interesting that you picked up on that, because there's definitely still an aspect of that, even in the late ones, even though the cello was then gaining ground to be equal. And like in this work, it's very much equal footing, I would say.
But another thing is that you hear with Beethoven, the cello and the piano were playing more or less together rhythmically, but in Brahms he's much more fluid with the solo instrument, isn't he? And he's hanging the notes on, missing the actual pulse that's on the piano, and just dwelling with the instrument as if it's a voice.
Yeah.
So it does feel quite different.
Yeah.
I think he like doing more like mastering the orchestration.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, we're ready for the next work? This is going to be very
Is it okay if we
different.
take a 5-minute
Oh,
break?
yeah. 5 minutes.
Because it's been a little while.
Yeah?
Yeah, so get up, move around, get to go to the bathroom, just 5 minutes.
Selfie.
Oh, thanks.
You're good.
There. What's her name?
Missing someone?
No, there's a couple of people still outside, but are they?
I mean, they're, you know, so, yeah, sometimes they're not that too patient.
So, the next place we're going to go is way different than everything we've been doing. We're going to basically the turn of the 20th century to Anton Webern, who was part of the Second Viennese School, which was founded by Schönberg. And what characterized the Second Viennese School was a complete letting go of tonality and of harmony in general, melody, harmony, and tonality in general. So Schönberg developed this way of composition that was called the 12-tone composition, which basically is a way of composition that's just completely mathematical, and it uses all the 12 tones in the series of notes. And basically they would take each note and use them once in a different chord combinations, and that would be the series. And how the composition would go is that it only goes through the notes that they chose in that order and then repeats. And then they would use different rhythms and different dynamics and different also extended techniques on the instruments, developing that kind of stuff to make music out of it. And it's not even really generally meant to be enjoyable to listen to. It's more just interesting, and it's quite, there are like characters and emotions in it, but it's much more abstract. It's much more about just sound in general. And so like they use a lot of sul ponticello, which means on the bridge, and this is the bridge, which makes kind of a grating sound as well. They use also the mute a lot, which mutes compared to which mute, like literally mutes the instrument, and also using a lot of like artificial harmonics, like these kind of funky sounds. And the piece we're going to play for you guys is called three little pieces, and it's 3 super short pieces. They're about a minute each, and they're very different and very strange, and I'm really curious to see what all of you guys think about it. So yeah, hope you enjoy. Um, 1914.
So, because it kind of reminds me of the interbellic art where everything was everything was just depicting the kind of the brutal impact of the First World War, where
Yeah.
the people in paintings had missing leg,
Yeah.
missing arm, everything was really sad in art
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah.
So it kind of reminds me of the human reaction you would have to, I don't know,
Yeah.
a bombing.
Yeah.
Or
Exactly.
the news you get in a telegram that your brother sadly passed away. It's
Yeah.
very kind of instant, dramatic, and it triggers something very instant in you almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Some of those noises sound like my front door.
I love the 20th century. Yes, but this, whereas what we heard before the break sounded like the music coming out of the heart of a single person. This sounds like the music coming out of the universe, the stars and the planets and the heavy industry and the planes and the bombs. And there's something big about this.
Yeah.
It's a shame the pieces were so short.
Yeah. Well, that's what's quite amazing about this piece is that it's so small, but it's like there's so much packed in it.
yeah.
It's
And it almost sounds like a machine,
Yeah.
like post-industrial machinery, where it's just like down conveyor belts, no feelings, no humanity to
Yeah.
it. It's very mechanical, very...
Yeah. Because it's like more, sorry.
So I mean, what's being described here is kind of a macrocosmic kind of picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was like a background thriller to Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a kind of surprising element
Yeah.
to it. Something really frightening is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so the suspense is there. It creates a suspense, and then it kind of just smooths itself out. Something has resolved itself. But that's kind of the impression I got.
Yeah.
Because like sometimes I try to figure out what the composer try to express. So like how I get the spirit is I watch some experimental movies. Like that immediately makes sense. Like just imagine watch the movie with this kind of music. They do weird stuff. You don't understand what they are doing, but that just the way they express. Yeah, because I don't know if you guys heard of Dadaism. Yeah, it's like 20th century art action that they just basically just say random words and do random behaviors to sort of express the deconstruction of the arts, basically. So that's how I link to this kind of music. Yeah, because there's no rules that say that music or arts need to express something, emotionally. It could be completely just random and completely not related to emotion. That also makes sense. So I think,
Also found the golden line with the philosophical lines of thought in Europe.
Yeah. Or like if you've ever been to Tate Modern, that's the place, sort of get the sense of this kind of music. Yeah.
I loved the end because I just wasn't expecting
Yeah.
it to end like that.
Yeah.
I was just like, where is it going?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, what just happened?
That's because we've been so conditioned to have a cadence at the end and rhythm, and somehow in our mind we're already expecting how it's going to finish.
Yeah.
Whereas this challenges us to keep listening because it might not go the way we think it's going to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To me, it has sort of a crossover with freeform jazz.
Yeah.
This is freeform jazz, they're making it up on the spur at the moment.
Yeah.
Whereas this is being played.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think this is the kind of stuff that paved the way for freeform jazz to develop, just completely taking away harmony, melody, and it is really precisely rhythmical. You'd be surprised, but
you don't perceive that.
yeah, exactly.
The emphasis on notes doesn't follow any
Yeah.
rhythmic
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Interesting that you said about rhythmical there, because I noticed I was struggling to breathe in bits of it, because it didn't feel rhythmical in a way.
Yeah. Well, that's what it should convey, but in order for us to execute that, we have to be extremely precise. So we're in holding the tension between long pauses. We need to know exactly where that's going and mathematically counting to achieve that. Because the ideas that he had were so precise, and because there are so few notes, like if that precision isn't achieved, then it really does just sound random. And I don't think it does sound random when it's just when it's executed in the way that he wrote it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I really laughed and I really enjoyed watching you two cue each other for that. Keep it all together.
Yeah.
Isn't it so hard? Just on what you said, is it so hard, like cueing each other? Does it just take practice? Because there are moments where you look at him and then he kind of looks back like, oh, I'm about to play something.
Yeah. Well, it takes practice, but also like we need to like know what each other is thinking. Also listening like the music. Yeah, that's the big part.
Feeling it together.
Actually, I generally prefer sitting on that side of the piano so I can actually see her. But because of this competition on Monday, I'm sitting like this because that's what they want more. So I'm just practicing sitting in this setup, whereas like I naturally like to sit with it. Like the piano would be a bit further to this side and I would be the side, so then we would both be able to see each other. And I could see her hands and she could see my hands and then it's...
How do you think that impacted on your performance at kind of different places?
Well, for me, it just means I have to listen much harder, but which is not a bad thing. But because I've played in both, so I can do both. It's just a matter of preference for me. Yeah.
It's curious that they should stipulate such strict.
Well, it's not strict. It's more like cultural in what they are looking for. You can kind of infer what they're looking for through what the setting is of the performance. Yeah.
So this is the practice, not the performance.
Well, this is actually more the performance. The competition is actually just it's way less important, to be honest, because because I mean this is way more enjoyable, like hands down. The competition is just a way to like maybe make some money, to be honest. But like the entire concept of a music competition is like antithetical to music anyway, so but it's just how it works. So yeah. So next, thank you. To end the evening, we're going to play two movements from the Cello Sonata by Sergey Prokofiev. And so even though they lived, Webern and Prokofiev lived around the same time. Prokofiev was a little bit younger, but this sonata was written in, 1949. So it's like 30 years after what we just wrote. And by then the music culture kind of went back to tonality, back to melody and things like this, and actually Prokofiev, he had a period where he developed a neoclassical style where he really tried to emulate the classical style of composition with a Russian romantic flair to it, basically. And So there are still some of these extended techniques and all these things that have been developed earlier, but it's all within much more of a traditional musical context. And the first movement, which is the second movement of the sonata, is it's kind of a satirical march type movement with a really romantic melody in the middle. But I don't really want to say too much about the structure of the Prokofiev, because it's kind of, I think he takes you on a journey, like switching from different, like what I like to say with Prokofiev, it's like you're flipping through a picture book, and each page has just a totally different picture, totally different image, totally different colors that have kind of zero relation to the previous page. And it kind of happens in the same amount of time that it would take to flip a page. So it just kind of happens, and you're just in a totally different place. But it's not as bipolar as with Beethoven. It's more like, I don't know, there's just a lot of variation. It goes in a lot of different worlds. It's really fun. So yeah, hope you enjoy. Tune again.